So this is our third grade project of our winter landscape and our trees. And we did our backgrounds last time. So our backgrounds, we used an analogous color scheme. So we have 3 to 4 different rings, including our black corners for our projects. So last time we painted the backgrounds, they looked like this, where we had our rings. The first one in the center I have here is like a yellow, green, green, blue, and the corners are black. Remember, we curved those corners with the circles or the ovals there, and we made sure they didn't curve in the wrong direction. So we are going to be painting our trees on top of this background here. I did 3 trees in my example, so I'm going to be doing 3 again using a little bit of some black and white paint here. I just have a tray with some paint to hold on here and a regular paintbrush. I'm going to start with the tree in the center. So I'm going to take my brush and I want to make a straight line down the center of the page. It's up to you how tall you want the tree to be, or if you want it to be short. I'm going to start with my tallest one in the center. So I'm going to make sure that my line is my center starting point of my tree. We're going to pay attention to each side of the line to make branches that curve out to the side. So I'm going to start my curving on the right side. I'm going to use my paintbrush here to start making those kind of wispy lines that go from the base of the tree, that tree trunk, if you will, and it's going to curve out towards the edge of the paper. So it's okay if they have a little bit of some gaps in them, if your branches aren't exactly perfect, because that's going to make it look more realistic. And I'm going to curve all the way down that line. As I get closer to the bottom, that is when I'm going to start making the branches move a little more straight to kind of create the bottom part of my tree. So I'm going to finish filling in all of those gaps here. And if you have gaps later that you want to fill in, you can easily come back and fix those parts. Just making sure that I'm keeping my brush with paint on it, but you don't want to glob the paint on there. Too much paint is going to cause some issues when we go to add our snow. I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side that I did before, starting at the top of the tree and doing some curving lines that come from the center base, that center line, the tree trunk, and they curve out. If you decide that you want to make your tree top a little bit taller, just use your paint to stretch out the tip of the tree and just add in a little bit of some extra branches there at the top. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to just make mine a little bit taller right there, and then I'm happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the other trees on the side using the same technique. You're going to start with those center lines, and then you're going to do the branching lines that come off to the side. Remember, it's okay if they're wispy. If they have a little bit of some gaps, it's just going to make it look more realistic. Just remembering I have those tree trunks there at the bottom to kind of show the ends. And then it's going to be time for us to move on to doing our snow. So make sure your brush is cleaned off. So you want to make sure that you have rinsed all the black off of there. Use your table towel to dry your brush off. You want a clean brush that we are going to be using the white paint to create those snow dots that go across our page. And we are actually going to be using the bristles for the snow. Sometimes we'll use the back end, but for the start of this, we're going to start with the white on our tips of our brush, and you're just going to be patting in some of that white paint to create snow. Now, this is where it can get a little tricky. If you have too much white paint on your brush, like here, I have a lot of white paint, it's going to look really globbed up and it's not going to look so much like snow. You might want to take your brush and rub it either on an empty tray or a scrap piece of paper to kind of ease that amount of white paint on your brush to kind of give it more of that feathery look. You're almost doing a technique that's called dry brushing, which is where you don't have as much of like wet paint or like water on your brush, and it has more of the dry bristles to kind of work with your paint to make it a little more fluffy. Makes your snow look like it's sitting on those branches. To make it look like we have a little bit of some more tree branches in there, if it gets a little too busy with the snow, you can easily come back with your brush, just make sure it's cleaned off, and use some more of the black paint to just go back and fill in some of those branches. Maybe you weren't happy with how heavy the snow looked. Just be mindful that if your paint that is white for your snow is very wet and you're mixing wet black paint in there, you're going to end up making gray. So if you need to let it dry for a few minutes before you come back with the black, that's totally fine. That way it avoids kind of mixing and making it muddy. For the snow that I'm going to fill in here, I'm just making sure that it's a little more dry on my brush this time, so I don't have so much overwhelming white globs on my tree. It makes the snow just look like it's more fluffy on there. And then you're going to just finish up any little last parts. Maybe you want to bring in some white highlights. You can make sure you have a little bit more of that thicker, rich white paint. And I'm just lightly touching it. You want to only use those tips of your paintbrush to create those little white dots that are kind of just bringing out the little pops of white. So you'll have a little bit of those bright whites, and you'll have some of the like faded, more fuzzy white areas. Just going to finish those up, and then we're going to be moving on to our snow in the background. All right, so cleaning off our brush, we are going to be using the bristles to create those snowflakes in the background. We're going to be using a flicking technique that's going to actually cause the paint to fall off of our brush and onto the paper. The more paint you have on your brush, the more you have like that splattering kind of look like this here. Just keeping your brush lower to the paper helps to make more contact so your paint isn't flat or flinging all over the place. It's kind of actually landing on your paper. So we're just going to sprinkle a little bit more of some snow on here. All across the sky. You can put some more on your trees. And if you do want to end up using a little bit of the back end of your paintbrush to create some snow dots that you have like some bigger pieces falling, you can definitely do that too. And then finally, the last thing that I decided to add was I used my paintbrush to just create some of these white strokes, and then I used my finger just to kind of blend them out to kind of give it that little fuzzy halo in the background. So you can even use your brush if you'd like to kind of paint those in. I like to paint them in and then just kind of rub them around. And that will complete our picture.